Guys, this is insane. I want to show you right now what Nate Silver just updated his prediction model to show. Well, first of all, he's like, oh my gosh, on the New York Times Sienna poll. Like, that actually changed a lot of his calculations, so much so that this morning he was out with, take a look there, this morning he was out with 63.8% chance of Donald Trump winning the Electoral College versus 36% Harris. And then this afternoon, the poll prediction model changed again, actually bumping Trump up even higher, 64.4% to 35.3%. I mean, this is kind of amazing. I can't underscore this enough. Now, you didn't see a ton of coverage about this New York Times Sienna poll over the weekend, right? Did you? On the weekend shows? So this is not really fitting with the narrative, and they want to give her one last chance, right? So unfortunately for her, and I'm just being practical, right? I'm just being absolutely forthcoming here. Unfortunately for her, because she hasn't had enough experience on the campaign trail, she hasn't had enough adversaries in the media shooting questions at her, she runs the risk of there being just too much pressure on this event. Don't forget, she's been holed up in that hotel in Pennsylvania trying to work on her script, so to speak. And the script is the script, right? How many times do we have to hear, well, I'm turning a new page. Okay, Kamala, the problem is, for 3.5 years, you've been on that page, right? So people don't really buy it when you say, I'm going to turn a new page. Unfortunately, again, for her, she's tethered to the wrong guy with the wrong policies. Of course, his policies look kind of quaint compared to some of the things she said, mind you. Anyway, take a look here at what the Daily Mail is now predicting. They are saying that he's got a 55% chance of becoming president. This is a 4.5% point boost since last week. And their model basically works where they're crunching all the national and state data, and they're feeding this into this model. These are like, how do I say this? The reason these algorithms are interesting, certainly to me, but they should be to you as well, is it's really kind of looking at it almost like a trader would, right, on Wall Street, where you have algorithms that are trying to mirror out all these different scenarios. You know, okay, 8,000 different ways that this could go, and what do we think the probability is of him winning the Electoral College versus Harris winning the Electoral College. So that's what they're crunching here. And again, anything can shift on a dime. And depending on what happens tomorrow night, we may see those kinds of shifts start to take place. But what Nate would point out in his model, and let me see if I have the latest, this is actually fantastic. If you look at the graphic of this, I'm going to try and put this up for you guys because it's actually wild. I mean, again, 64.4% chance that he's going to win it. And this is, it's like it just, the momentum keeps coming and coming and coming. And I don't believe in sort of counting your chickens before they hatch, and I just to be totally forthcoming. I mean, you know, I'm a big fan of the policies, especially vis-a-vis the alternative. But here's this poll I want to show you. So look at this. Again, 64.4% versus 35.3%. But what's amazing there is you see that divide, right? You see Trump going one direction, you see Harris going another direction. And that's pretty remarkable. I mean, I just find that really, really incredible. Let me put it over the Daily Mail prediction model here. So they've got a 55% chance. Nate Silver is actually modeling out a 64.4% chance. This is fascinating. It's a little bit, dare I say, when you look at the New York Times poll that came out, it's a little bit of Nate's like I told you so, because he's been saying all along that you have to factor into the prediction model issues like the lack of the bounce coming out of the DNC, issues like the lack of enthusiasm for her in Pennsylvania. And that's actually, all of this has led him to really be pretty, I think, optimistic for Trump, pessimistic for Kamala Harris. I mean, he does say that this is an especially important poll, the New York Times Sienna, because it's, quote, this is from his newsletter, our second highest rated pollster. So they're to be trusted in his estimation. So he says, quote, there's a real lesson here in the dangers of poll cherry picking. Democrat partisans have been blowing up my mentions, complaining about which polls are included in the silver bullet polling averages, and usually that stuff comes out in the wash through things like the model's house effects adjustment, which is calibrated mostly based on the more reliable surveys. And now he says one of the best pollsters in the country is coming forward with some very bad news for Kamala Harris. He also points out that the New York Times Sienna poll is worthwhile because it has a very large sample size, 1,695 likely voters, and also the poll is extremely recent. It follows the post-Labor Day weekend, and it's therefore field work that's very fresh. Very fresh. It was just completed on Friday, and he's saying, like, I'm trying not to say I told you so. I'll try not to say I told you so. I told you so, but I told you so, right? I mean, look, it is hard to figure out some of these polls when it comes to Donald Trump, in part because not everybody's entirely forthcoming. And so I think the prediction models are actually very effective in trying to measure some of these other less tangible things that might affect where people are actually going to vote. He writes also that the poll provides trend lines for comparison, that the numbers are just a bit worse for Harris than the previous New York Times Sienna National Survey in July, and considerably worse for her, quote, than in a series of battleground state polls the Times conducted in early August. And last, he says, this New York Times Sienna poll tends to drive the media conversation about the race, given the poll's well-deserved reputation for accuracy. Now, the only problem with that is no one in the mainstream media is actually covering the New York Times Sienna. But interesting how that works, don't you think? I mean, fascinating how, the bad news just for them gets it totally ignored. They'd be wise to pay attention to this, though. Nate goes on to say the problem for Harris is that Donald Trump has been gaining on her in our polling averages, he writes, at least in the most important electoral college states. If, say, Harris had gained 1 point when the conventional bounce adjustment was expecting her to gain 2 points, then it would look more like a rounding error in the model. Instead, though, she's actually losing ground since the start of the convention in swing polls, which is why this debate has so much riding on it. This debate is so crucial, is so important. Listen, a quick shout out for my financial research newsletter company. Listen, if you are not subscribed to this, I want you to do that. You can do it. Actually, you can do it for free if you just go and sign up for the email. But if you want to get the good stuff, if you want to get the 76 report, use code word dollar, DOLLAR, code word dollar, and it's just $1 a month. Hence the code word dollar to start. $1 a month for the first 2 months, then it goes to $9.95. But look, you need to invest. Like, if there's one thing you need to do, what happened with the market today? How do you like that? What did I say on Friday? It was a good time to get in with everything going lower. I do believe that ultimately the Federal Reserve is going to be there. I'm not your investment advisor, but I tend to have a pretty good sixth sense on these things. And yes, of course, the Dow is up back over 40,000, 1.2%. S&P 500 trading up 1.1 on the day, and the NASDAQ also higher. Listen, you need to be invested for the long term. It's part of doing business, shall I say. You want to be in the game, and there's a certain risk, I think, if you're not. And again, everybody has their own risk tolerance, but for those of you that are looking for names that you can invest in and hope to see some return over the long term, we have 3 model portfolios. There's the American Resilience portfolio that's kind of growth oriented. There is Apple came out, by the way, new Apple 16, lots of colors. So that's one of the portfolios. We also have the inflation protection portfolio because inflation's coming, and then we also have the income builder portfolio. I've shown you some of the graphics on the income builder portfolio because that's been up considerably vis-a-vis in the last 3 months, ending at the end of August vis-a-vis what the S&P has done. So there's a lot of opportunity here for those of you that are interested. Again, go to 76research.com.